Hello everybody and welcome to today's video. We are getting our fighting on with today's video. We are looking at two titles that SNK has just released on the Nintendo Switch. One is King of Fighters R2, the other is Samurai Shodown 2. These both were Neo Geo Pocket Color titles that the company has brought to the Switch. And it follows on from an all-girls fighting game, I can't remember the exact name of it, that came out a couple of months ago that I really enjoyed. So, as a fan of both Samurai Shodown and King of Fighters, I grabbed these just to see what they would look like, or they looked like back in the day when they were on a fairly primitive bit of hardware. And I've been very impressed. I will have reviews up for both of these games on digitallydownloaded.net. I'll do mini reviews and cover them both in the one article because there's not too much to talk about with regards to them, but they are very enjoyable, they're very entertaining, and I'm really impressed that a console from back then, back when the Neo Geo Pocket Color was a thing, was able to achieve this kind of quality animation and fighting system. So for people who are perhaps not as familiar with the console, the Neo Geo Pocket Color was released in 1999, which was the same time that the GBA was really doing its thing. A couple of other consoles that were released around the same time was the Swan Crystal, which was a Japan-only device. It was a handheld released around the same generation, and there was also the N-Gage, that Nokia device that didn't last very long indeed, the one that was part phone, part game console. So that was what the Neo Geo Pocket Color was up against. And I remember fighting games on the GBA not being particularly great. There was one that I played an awful lot of called Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance, and it was a kind of 3D fighting game that was ported to the GBA in a fairly primitive way. It worked, it was playable, and it was enjoyable enough, but it wasn't a great fighting game experience in that I can't return to it now and enjoy it. There was a Tekken game that was on the GBA as well, which was again reasonable enough but not great. There was Street Fighter, of course. Street Fighter's on absolutely everything, and again it was okay. It was not a great fighting game experience. And I remember, having never owned a Neo Geo Pocket, I remember thinking that handheld games were just not, or consoles were just not up to the standards to do the fighting game genre justice, because I did enjoy fighting games even back then, but back then if I wanted to play them I really needed to pull out my GameCube or PS2 to get the most out of them. So having a chance to play these now, I really wish I did have a Neo Geo Pocket Color, because I think I would have got a lot of use out of it. These games are really great, and even though they're definitely a pared down equivalent to what a full console could achieve, what SNK was really good at doing was achieving a really smooth animation system and distilling down the combat system to 2 buttons. So there was only the 2 buttons on the Neo Geo Pocket Color, and that's quite limited compared to what fighting games generally offer even back then. But the way that they managed to compensate for that in a way that still provides for a really enjoyable, nuanced fighting game experience is really impressive. And these kinds of games are very playable as a result. So I'm not particularly great at fighting games as much as I enjoy them. I'm not really good with combo memorization, and I don't have the patience to learn the full move set of characters. I just kind of, I must admit I enjoy button mashing my way through them a bit, and I play these games for the characters and the quality of the animation, the art, all of that kind of stuff. I enjoy the genre, but not necessarily for the reason that competitive players do. But this one, it's very accessible. You can put it on easy mode and really just kind of mash your way through. The character designs are excellent. They use these big bobble-headed character design so that you can tell which character is your favorite immediately. So in my case, I'm a big fan of Athena from King of Fighters, and I'm a big fan of Nekaruru from Samurai Shodown, and both of those characters are immediately distinctive and clear when you play on this when you play these versions of the games. So they've captured the character really nicely. The animation is smooth, slick, and very responsive. So this is the kind of game that operates like a fighting game should. More primitive fighting games on handhelds especially had a clumsiness to it, a clunkiness, where the animation would be limited by the hardware, and because the animation was limited, it didn't have the smoothness or the responsiveness that you would expect from a good fighting game. This console, which was very clearly designed to be used for arcade ports and whatever, really focused on making sure that the animation was possible and it could get a good level of detail into that animation. So that comes across very nicely into these ports as well. On the Switch, it's all a very nice experience indeed. So these are nice cheap games. They're about $12 in Australian each, and you get the full range of options. There is a rewind function, so if you are committed to perfecting the combat systems that are offered on this one, you can actually spend time rewinding to learn your mistakes, and that's a fairly common feature to retro throwback games now, but it's certainly welcome in this one, especially with the kind of precision that it requires. You can really practice getting those more difficult combos done. It also has multiplayer, which is really neat, because obviously back then you actually needed two consoles to connect up. With this one, it enters into this split screen mode if you want to play multiplayer, and you can share a controller with somebody else. Thankfully, because there are only a couple of buttons involved, it's very easy to just share controllers and still enjoy the game in full in multiplayer. There are a number of hardware features, so as you can see on the screen right now, I've zoomed things up, so it's only the edge of the Neo Geo that you can see. But you can actually play on native resolution if you prefer as well, or however, you can zoom in and out basically as you'd like to get the optimal experience for what you'd like. You can also play with the kind of LCD dot matrix screen that you've seen in some of the other clips, or you can clear things up like I have done here. And when you clear things up, you can really admire just how attractive these games are, not just in terms of the bobble-headed characters, which I talked about before, and not just because the movement is quite clean and crisp and the animation is good, but you can see in the backgrounds there's a lot of work that went into these. Obviously, King of Fighters, especially Samurai Shodown, are well known for having really gorgeous art in the backgrounds, and you can't achieve quite that much with this one, but the range of backgrounds is really good. The detail that went into them is really great at capturing the kind of exotic nature of the backgrounds of these fighting games. And again, it's all very immersive. It's very, very easy to, as a fan of these series, to see these games as legitimate entries in those properties. So yeah, I'm a big fan of it. And like I was saying just before, the dot matrix effect you can create here, I actually prefer this because as a retro gamer, I remember playing all of my old consoles and having that kind of visual effect, and it is an aesthetic thing that I quite enjoy, but it is obviously not for everybody, so they've included all these different options. The games themselves are fairly limited in terms of the amount of modes and whatever. You don't get what you get in modern fighting games, but the range of characters is quite good. Each of them has their own distinctive style, which somehow they've managed to get across, even though there are only two buttons to work with. And you will get quite a lot of play out of these, especially if you do enjoy the multiplayer side of things as well. The difficulty options are there as well, so you can slowly scale up as you get better at the games. I don't have too much else to say about these. I do enjoy them. Like I said, these are nice, neat, clean, simple fighting games. They're the kinds of ones that you'll enjoy having on your console to come back to for short bursts of play. They're not the kind of thing that you'll spend hours and hours and hours playing, but at $12 they're pretty low cost way of getting some classic fighting game experience, and unlike most other retro fighting games, these ones have aged well. Fighting games as a genre is up there with sports games as something that I don't think ages well. JRPGs age well from generation to generation, and you can go back to even the earliest consoles to enjoy the JRPGs that were produced on those devices. But platformers are the same thing. You can still enjoy Mario Brothers the same that you did back when it was new on the NES. But fighting games and sports games don't tend to age quite as well because the next generation brings very substantial quality of life improvements to the experience. But in this case, these games actually have held up really well, and if you are interested in retro fighting games rather than struggle through ones that are not so enjoyable, I recommend these. Anyway, that's enough for this video. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Go and check out my review when it's up. Please do click the like and subscribe button and the little bell so you get notifications with each video. That way you won't miss any that I create. Otherwise, please do consider backing me on Patreon so I can continue to grow this channel. So on that stutter, I'm going to finish up today. Thanks very much for watching. We will see you at the next video.